What's up, guys? What's up, cycling fanatics? Welcome back to another race breakdown video. Right now we are on board with the national championships, the Dutch national championships in the elite man category, and we're jumping straight into the race. In this race breakdown, I'm gonna discuss the tactics and why and what I did during the race. And I'm also gonna talk about the power numbers. How much power does it require to do a race like this? How much power do you need to be able to keep up with this pace? And kind of what are the bottlenecks for a rider in a race like the national championship, in a big road race. So we're on board. We are already an hour and 45 minutes into the race. The pace is very high at the moment. The total distance of this race is 165 kilometers. And it was a little bit different than the other road races that are usually held in the Netherlands, because it's a 10-kilometer loop. So at the top right, you'll see the track layout. And this was a 10-kilometer loop that we had to do 17 times. 17 times over a cobble section just before the finish. 17 times through all these sharp corners. So this made it a very, very hard lap and a very hard race. And it wasn't just those tight corners and the cobbles and the super high motivation of all the riders. It was also the temperature. It was very warm this day. It was an average was about over 30 degrees Celsius. So that's super hot for Dutch standards. And all of this made that out of 135 riders, only 65 riders actually finished the race. So we're gonna see how this went down and why it was so tough. So guys, don't forget, drop me a like. These videos take a lot of time, so show some appreciation by giving me a like on the video, and feel free to comment anything you want down below in the comment section. I'm gonna ask you some questions during this race, so let's open a discussion with tips for everybody, not just for me, but for all the cycling fanatics that are watching this video. Watching the back camera, you can see my teammate Martin. I'm gonna point out the team colors so you know who to watch for. So we are a red jersey and a black bibs. That's our color. It's been attacks after attacks after attack after attack. This race, everybody was very motivated. There's 135 riders on the starting list, and all these riders had to be selected. So you had to earn some kind of points to be able to race this race. And a little bit different than the usual road races, it was just a little more sort of individual. We were still racing with teams, but the teams were not the same size, because not every team had the equal amount of selected riders. And everybody wants to score well on the national championships. This was like the most important race of today. At the top right, you'll see a weather vane in the map that points out the wind direction. And this was going to change a little bit throughout the day. Currently, Frank is in front of me, and he's pulling us just across the entire field. I was a bit far in the back, just like Frank. Behind me is Melle and Jordi. And a lot of us were in the front a long time of this race, but at this moment we were all a bit far back. And Frank was like the motor pacer for us, because it was gonna go down. We had a little quick conversation with each other. It's like, okay, this is the moment. At some point in the race, when it's a tough race like this one, you can just feel that the pace is going up, even though it was already high. There's more attacks, and the reaction on the attacks is different. When somebody attacks, they actually get a little gap, where before in the race, there would not be a gap. People stop chasing, not as many riders will chase, and you will notice that riders will get a little bit tired. And then it's very important to be super, super sharp, because at some point it's gonna go down and there's gonna be a breakaway. This loop of today would never be a field sprint. We already discussed that, so we knew if we wanted to have a shot at any position in the top 10 or whatever, we would have to be in that breakaway. So finishing what Frank started, I'm pulling a couple guys to the front here. Behind me is Frank. We've got Melle, we've got Martin, we've got Jordi. We're all riding to the front. And right now what you see is big, strong attacks in the front. And I thought it was a bit early. I had discussed this race with some other people and with my trainer, Leon. He was like, I think it's going to go down in the last 40K. It's going to be a battlefield. Be very sharp until then, but don't really go with a lot of moves until then. But at this point, you know, me and Melle and Frank were like, all right, this is the moment. It's gonna happen. So as I see this attack going, it's gonna happen right now. I jump on it, and yeah, I was like, dude, this is it. So right here, I get on the wheel of this rider, and there's like, I don't know, 5, 6 riders, and we instantly get a gap. We go through this sharp corner, which is always great for creating a gap, because the peloton goes through corners fairly slow versus a couple single riders. And looking behind me in the back camera, you can see straight away there's a massive gap. We're not being chased, and within seconds we've broken off from the peloton. And we are a decent group. You can see there's more groups up there, and this is usually how it happens in a race like this. It's not like the total breakaway just rides off. It's a couple attacks, and then all of a sudden, there's the breakaway. These couple little groups that have attacked, they will fuse, and if they find each other, and if they start rotating in a good pace, then they just get so much speed that they would, you know, stay away. And that's really what I was expecting to happen right now. So I was counting, and it ended up to be like 20 riders that got away at this moment. And there's a couple strong riders. I mean, the winner of the day was here. A couple other strong guys, they were all in this group. So I was like, yeah, I made it. Finally, I got in the break. I was there at the right moment, right there in the race. I had to be where I needed to be, and now we could really start the race, and I actually had a good position. I don't know for what, but at least I was not missing the breakaway again like the previous races. Right now we're turning onto the cobbles. You have not seen the cobbles before, but these cobbles were insane. They were so bumpy. It was crazy. I've been on cobbles before, and I've been on cobbles of Paris-Roubaix, which is hard to compare because I wasn't riding a normal road bike, but these cobbles were very difficult. They were super bumpy, and they were so much more difficult than the other cobbles we were racing in previous races. You can see it in the footage. I mean, it looks terrible because it's shaking all over the place, but that's really how hard it was. And if you look at the power numbers, the average power on this cobble section, it was about a minute to a minute and 15 seconds. Every time the average power was around 400 watts. So imagine doing 17 loops with crazy cobbles, and every time you had to push 400 watts. And it's hard to push 400 watts on cobbles. It's not like a flat, you know, silky smooth tarmac road where it's fairly easy to push out high power numbers. If you want to push out high numbers on cobbles, it's so much harder. And as you can see, after the cobbles, it shatters. Even the little group that we had, it sort of falls apart because there's a couple of guys who wouldn't follow, and there's other guys who were going way faster, or they just get over the cobbles a little bit better. And right now we're being joined by a big bridge from behind. It's like 15 riders who bridged up to our group, and we've got Melle in the bridge, we've got Luke in the bridge, so they did a great job first by letting us go, and then when there was a bridge, they made sure they were on it. So right now we've got about 20 riders who are away from the peloton, but the front here is a bit unorganized right now, but this will get together later. what often happened is at the cobbles, it would sort of break away or it would break apart, and then riders would start breaking away from that. So if it would go full gas, it was super hard because you get off this cobble section and you had no time to catch up. It was just on the gas straight away. And other times it would just go slow after the cobbles, and the speed would die down, and the entire group or the entire peloton would just bunch up and ride across the finish for the next lap. So it was very different. But, as the day progressed, as the race, we got further into the race, it started to fall apart more and more. And what you can see here is that the way the breakaway would form is often also the way it sort of gets caught back into the peloton. Sometimes the peloton stays together and just, absorbs the breakaway, but that usually happens on big, wide, open roads without too many turns. But in a race like this, it was groups all day long. It was really chaotic. It was very hard to keep track of what was happening. At some points I was like, is there people up the road or not? And how many? Where am I in the field? I found it very difficult to keep an eye on the situation. And that's also because I'm not that experienced. And I have not raced that many races this year, actually. I've only done 5 races in the Netherlands, which is, not enough to get to know the other riders, the correct strategy, to just be able to really get your rhythm. My last race was like over a month ago, and it was really sort of a search to what I was doing and when to go or when not to go. Right here, number 43, spoiler alert, this was the guy that won. So he's taking off right now. I'm waiting a little bit just for a couple guys to react. I don't want to jump on every wheel, but here there's more riders that react, and I just go with the flow. If there's enough riders that attack, then you don't have to, pull that hard and rotate a little bit and then catch whoever went catching back. But as you can see, there's little groups falling back, and we just overtake them with high speed. So this was going on all the time. It was never a dull moment. And with all these sharp turns, it was actually every time a matter of positioning for the next turn and the section after that. So this race was really a big race from start to finish. And right now I got on the front and I was pedaling, not even that hard. There's still a few riders who are all in a straight line right behind me, and then I think there's a little gap, and then the rest of the peloton. But as you can see, there's a lot of riders right now. It's over 20. And then here's the gap. So here's the gap to the peloton. It's not a big gap, but we're still away. So, if we can keep up this pace, and if we, organize and keep it going, we would definitely be breaking away. But as you can see behind us, the peloton, which is also a straight line, is going pretty fast, and they're already catching up with us. So the whole peloton got back together. The attacks didn't stop. It went on and on for a long time. But I want to show you this, how it was a battle to get on this cobble section. So we're going through this left turn, and then what's coming up is a 180-degree, very sharp turn onto the cobbles. So you're in a standing still, and then going onto the cobbles, which is the worst thing. So you're super slow, turning onto the cobbles. You have to accelerate, and the faster you go on these cobbles, the better it is. I found a little grass strip on the side, which I took every single lap, and it was just a little smoother than the cobbles, but it was really only at the beginning. So the rest of this strip, the best thing was just to grab it by the nuts and just do it. Very tough on your hands. I was squeezing my handlebar like crazy not to just slide off the bars during this section. I was wearing gloves, but after, 10 loops, my hands really started to hurt, and I actually just lost a big piece of skin on my left hand during the race. So after that, I could hardly hold my handlebars tight enough to be able to race on these cobbles. It was madness. It was really, really tough. And my tire pressure was kind of low. I was doing 6.5, but it could have been easily been a lot lower. But I didn't want to risk a puncture, which would be catastrophic on a race like this, because there would be wheels in the follow car, but you would definitely, be out of the race. If you're somewhere in the front and it splits up into groups, then you never get into that group again after you get a flat. You can join in the first group that you get into. But here I'm grabbing a water bottle. Thank you very much. We've got a couple guys, a couple parents from riders from our team along the side of the road. My parents were up there after the finish line as well, handing out bottles, and we pretty much used these bottles for, half of it to drink and the other half just to throw it over your neck and your back and your legs, because it was so hot. So to get a little bit of cooling from the water, you just throw half of the water straight over your body. I would grab like 2 bottles every lap almost, and the lap was only like 15 minutes. So there was a lot of water going through this race. It's a constant attack. It never stops, and there's no way how I can sort of summarize this entire race in a fairly short amount of time, because it was such a dynamic race. There was so much happening, and it's very difficult to find the actual moment where it really happened. I was watching this footage back, and I was like, it's like I forgot half of the race, or I have such a different idea of how it went down than what actually happened. And I'll get to that later, because I missed a very important moment in the race, because I wasn't there. I was pretty much in the front, like I am now, the whole race, except for the most important time, when the break actually happened, which is a spoiler alert, but I'm going to show you how and what happened. So right now, there's not a breakaway yet. How do I know? Because there's a couple riders who were in the top 10 who are still around me. So I'm still pushing in the front. I'm right there, and we're doing like averaging of 42 kilometers an hour right now, which is kind of high on a circuit like this. Very sharp corners. We've got the cobbles, which slow you down a lot, and it's very surgy. There's not a steady pace, which actually takes down the average speed. If it would be on a big road with a big peloton and everybody's just rotating a bit easy, then the average speed would be easily up to 50k an hour, especially with the power numbers that we were pushing. At the end of the video, I'll tell you what the average power was over this 4-hour race, and it was really high. As you can see right now, again, I'm in the front. Guys are attacking. I'm not jumping on every single wheel because I would just kill myself, but when there's enough riders going, I'm jumping after it. Right here, number 134, he got on the podium. So I'm right there with him, which I didn't know back then, but right now I can see it, that I'm in a good position right now. I miss a little bit of knowledge about the other riders. I miss a bit of strategy and race instinct that I missed during a race like this. It's always easy to look at this after the race and like, hey, why didn't I get on this wheel? Or why did I close this gap by myself? But when you're in the race, there's no time to think about stuff. If you doubt and you don't jump on it straight away, it's already too late. So right now I'm just continuing, try to, keep pulling, and then, it was kind of hard to find a rhythm with other riders. They would just give a big pull, like a massive pull, and then do nothing. And then I would pull, and there's nobody in my wheel. And that's what was happening all the time. So if you have a tip, for me, but also for other riders about this, why is this happening? What am I doing wrong? Or what could I change about this that will maybe get other riders to cooperate better? Or am I doing something wrong? Let me know. So right now, 2 hours, 6 minutes into the race, we're gonna jump a little bit forward. because right now there's still no solid breakaway. There's groups up the road. We are attacking like crazy. I'm right there with the first, let's say, 20, 30 riders. I'm jumping on attacks. I'm following wheels, but it didn't happen yet. Right now, a little bit further up the race, and I've jumped on a couple attacks again. And, you know, there's gaps. There's so many gaps. If we would start rotating really, really well, we would probably just ride off and break away big time. The guy who is with me right now, 134, like I said, he was on the podium. So watching this race footage back, I know I was doing the right thing at the moment. There's a couple guys with me, and then looking behind, there's a big gap, and there's a couple riders, and then there's another big gap. So if we would fuse and push full gas, then we would definitely stay away. But for some reason, you know, the guys that are with us are either not happy with who they are riding with, or I don't know what's going on. Maybe the rubber band was still too strong. You know, at some point in the race, it's going to snap, and it just was not the right moment yet. So I had to keep it up a little bit more, and I was feeling very good up until this moment. The week in preparation was terrible. I had the worst sleep of the entire week I could have. Massive jet lag, which I always have, but now I had a really tough time because I had a long holiday and another trip before and after my holiday towards United States. So I was totally in a 9-hour jet lag starting this week, and I didn't sleep that much, and I was really, you know, not sure about how I was going to feel on this race. So I tried to just rest as much as I could. And on the day itself, I felt pretty good. And I had a couple training sessions done in Florida, which were super hot. It was like over 30 degrees Celsius. So maybe this was actually my advantage, that I was, you know, I had been riding in hot temperatures not too long before this race, so I could sort of adjust to it a little bit better. I was feeling fine at this moment. I was feeling strong, and I really was ready to work hard for a result on this day. Riding through the feeding zone right now. This is my dad. Thanks, Dad. I grab a bag of ice cubes, which I stuff under my jersey in my neck. Most of the ice melted, but it was still a nice, refreshing feeling, and it helps you to sort of keep you cool. We did everything to keep cool. I mean, before the start, I was with a wet towel in my neck, throwing some ice in my neck, and I would try to stay in the shade. You know, lots of bottles from the side, which were given to us by the caretakers, by the parents of our riders, with most of the time was pretty cold water. So all of this can cool you down, and that's sort of all you can do, because you still have to push hard, and it was just a very tough time. Still, the group is together. There might be one or two guys up the road. We're not too worried about that. That's not going to stick for another hour and a half. So unless there's more riders who are going to really punch it, we're still in one group. Right here, we're passing the motorcycle, which had, you know, written down whoever was away in the breakaway and how many seconds. Dude, I had no idea what they wrote down. It was really hard to read, so I was not sure what was going on exactly at this point of the race, which is stupid. You should know. But all I knew was I was in the front. I was having good position. I was sticking in the first 30 riders, and if there would be a break, I was going to be there because I'm in the front the whole time. So that was good. I was feeling great. So again, pushing hard in the front, we've got my teammate Luc, who's there with me, a couple strong riders, and we're going pretty fast right now. We're on a tailwind, so it goes fast. It's single file, and I was like, okay, when is this going to happen? I was feeling great, but also I was starting to have cramps, which is, you know, a bit counter-intuitive, but I was starting to have a little bit of cramps, so I wasn't sure how long I could keep it up. I started to grab more water. I tried to, you know, conserve a little bit more energy, but I also had to stay in the front or else I was going to miss it. So it was a tough decision. stay in the front and maybe sacrifice my legs. And if I would cramp up, that would be the end of the day. Or fall back and try to recover and then not be there whenever something happened. So it was difficult. I wasn't sure what to do. Right now I'm still pushing. I was like, I'm gonna keep on going, you know, whatever happens until if I block, then too bad, but sometimes it goes away and I could just keep going in the race. 2 hours 43 in the race. We only have an hour and 15 minutes left. I was like, dude, it's got to happen. How long is it gonna take? So I'm in the front again, prime position. We're going on to this crazy cobble section again. And there's a couple riders in front of me. It's all stretched out. And check out what happens after the cobbles. It completely falls apart. So I get off these cobbles and then I overtake a guy and there's a massive gap. So I'm like, okay, this is it. If I close this gap and there's no one in my wheel, then we're probably gonna stay away. I'm in the break and I've done a good job. So, you know, really pushing hard. There's a guy in my tail. So I'm like, okay, we're gonna rotate together. Let's close this gap. And then we're in. When is it gonna happen? It can't take that much longer. We're getting there, but big gap again. Behind me, no one is following. So I think this is a good moment and I'm there. Well, I guess again, because 2 minutes later, you know, we're being caught again by whoever is behind us. And then you can see it right here. This is in the feeding zone, so it's a little bit more chaotic, but everybody's all over the place. And we're not going that fast. People are looking behind them. What are we doing? Number 134 here is looking behind like, guys, keep rotating, which is not happening. Yeah, it's chaos. It was total chaos. It was just very hard to do, you know, to get an idea of what was I doing. So at this point, I'm like, okay, I can fall back a little bit and maybe recover a little bit because I was having more and more cramps. Wasn't feeling super strong anymore at that moment. And, you know, I figured I'll just let a couple of riders pass. I can be in the draft a little bit more, have 10 minutes, and then ride back to the front. So I let a couple of guys pass. Look behind me. I'm like, there's the judge. What? I'm already last wheel of the group. Not a good place to be in. This group was way smaller than I thought. I think there's only like 70 riders left in this race. We're almost 3 hours in the race. And maybe there's a group behind this judge car, but the rest is probably already taken out of the race. I'm not 100% sure, but I think they take a 5-minute cutoff time. So if you're 5 minutes behind the first rider or behind the first group, they will take you out of the race. That's also the reason why there's so many riders that didn't finish today, because their distance to the first group was just getting too big. So I'm going back to the front straight away because I fell back way too far, which I was not happy with. And I needed to be back in the front. So we're 10 minutes later getting over this cobble section. And then right now I'm approaching the first riders of the group. I'm like, okay, nothing happened. But I look a little bit further up the road and I see riders are gone. I'm like, damn, I missed it. So I overtake these riders. I just keep my momentum. I keep pushing. And I see there's a big gap towards whoever is riding in front of me. And apparently that's when it happened. That's how fast it can happen. 10 minutes. And it's gone. Super stupid. Why did I do that? And during the race, I didn't really realize it, what I see now. I mean, I'm watching this footage all back. I have the time to look at it. It took me a long time to actually find this moment in the race because it was very difficult to see when it actually happened. But 3 hours into the race, that's when the breakaway formed. and grabbing another bottle here. Right at that moment, I was chilling in the back. Why? I spent 2 hours 45 minutes in front of the race, and at the moment I fall back, it happens. Why does this happen? Do you guys experience the same in your races? Did I just do a very stupid move? Is it a coincidence? Why did it happen to me? And it happens more often. So I'm just not that smart, I guess. I'm not racing smart enough, or I don't know when I can or cannot fall back a little bit. Because I was in the front the whole time, ready to go. And then, just at that time that I wasn't paying attention, now it's too late. Now I'm pushing in the front. I want to rotate. I want to pull these guys with me. I was encouraging them, like, let's go. Let's start rotating. Let's grab it, take it back. The weird thing is, every other attack until now, everybody started chasing like crazy and get it back. But now, these guys would take one pull and then that's it. Of course, everybody's tired and it's still a team sport. So maybe there's team members that they didn't want to chase. I'm not sure because it's the Dutch Championship. I know there's a lot of riders from the race who also watch my videos. Maybe they can comment on what's happening right now. If they were, not going full gas because they knew they had riders up the front in the break, or if it's just another reason why why we're not able to really work together and get up a high speed and just get this group back. Yeah, and in some way I do really understand that at some point the tank is empty, and when you missed that break, a lot of these guys, they know it's just that's the way it goes, and when you miss it, and then it's best to conserve energy and try to get the best result you can from the group you're in. Right now I'm actually stretching my quads. I'm in the last wheel. There was a little bit of a headwind at this section, so I'm unclipping my legs and stretching my quads left and right because I was having cramps as well. So it's not that weird that we're not going full gas anymore. It was super hot. Like I already mentioned, I had a little bit of adjustment on the heat because I was training in Florida a little bit a couple of weeks ago. But still, I got cramps because it was a very hard race and it was really warm. And yeah, I can imagine everybody was tired. So I was still super motivated to close the gap to the front. We still had 50 minutes on the clock. But I did not have any teammates up the road. So that's different than these other guys, because I know in that first group of, 12 riders, the breakaway, there were teammates of all these guys. So after I stretched, it went better actually. The cramps went away again, and here we are on the cobbles. I just want to get forward again because, as I said before, it was attacks and slow and attacks and slow. And the fact that we missed the breakaway did not mean that we're just going to finish the race in a peloton and go for sort of a field sprint with the peloton. No. Like, there was only 60 riders that finished because there was a cutoff time of about 5 minutes. So these groups, the peloton, it would break up into pieces. Check out the rear camera. Check how everybody's just dying on this cobble section because it was really tough. And I get over these cobbles, and again, there's a massive gap. This group was not going to stay together. That was for sure. So even though we missed the breakaway and we're not racing for the first 10 spots here, we're still racing for the rest. Lose your focus, you're going to end up in a group in the back, and then maybe you're going to be taken out of the race. I was looking for a result this race, so I was still going. So every little attack that was going, every group that was going to jump out of our group, which was now the second group in the race, I wanted to be on because I did not want to be dropped out in a group in the back, like in the third or in the fourth group, and then for two reasons. First of all, the result would get less and less because there's so many riders in front of you. And also, you risk the chance to just be taken out of the race completely. So right now, the speed drops with these guys I was riding behind, and they just stopped chasing. I see riders up the road, so I'm going full gas. So I'm trying to get aero a little bit, and I'm just hammering it down to chase this back and to close this gap. And I'm the only one. Look behind me, nobody. In front of me, big gap. I'm like, okay, nobody's coming with me. I'm gonna go across because I don't want to get left behind in another group. So I was actually the only one that came across. And I was the last one that came across. So this was another split in the race. So it was very good that I did that, because the guys that didn't follow me, they, now they are in the third group. So the groups were just splitting up every time. So it was a battle. It was a battle until the finish. Some races are easy. It's a big peloton. There's a breakaway. The peloton stays together, and then maybe they catch the breakaway back or not. This race was a battle from start to finish. It was splitting up into groups from start to finish. And if you don't pay attention, or if you're, think it easy, you're just gonna be dropped out of the race. There was actually a couple teammates of me that got dropped out of the race, unfortunately. One crashed after the cobbles, and I think 3 of them, their race only lasted for 120 kilometers until they had to quit, or they got taken out, unfortunately. So there were me, Martin, and Jordi finished the race, and the other guys, unfortunately, couldn't finish. 3 hours, 20 minutes, 140k. We've got 25k left on the clock. So what happened before is that I was a little bit in the back because I was stretching. I had my cramps and stuff. And it was the same as when I missed the breakaway. Like, I was in the back. I missed the big breakaway of the race. And now I was in the back. I ended up behind this gap that I had to close all by myself. So I was like, damn, same mistake twice. So right now I'm going back to the front again, because you don't want to be in the back, but sometimes it's just you don't have the legs. It seems easy when you watch the footage, but when you're in the race, sometimes your legs are just hurting, and at that moment you make the decision to fall back a little bit and to try and recover. And it's difficult to judge in hindsight, like, oh, I was still having good legs or not. I can see my heart rate, I can see the power, but I can't bring back the feeling. And I'm pretty sure, like, throughout this race, from this point on, it was feeling pretty tough. Going over these cobbles again, in the front of our group. So I'm in 4th wheel right now, and these cobbles were always tough. And every lap, they got tougher and tougher. The speed went down a little bit. The wind was turning. Right now, the wind was really like southeast. So we had almost a straight headwind on these cobbles. It was not very strong, but it was present. And, starting the cobbles with virtually no speed and then trying to accelerate on these massive, crazy, bumpy cobbles with a wind was just super tough. The speed you see right now is not correct. We'll definitely be going like 30, 35 kilometers an hour. Pushing out an average of 400, but most of the time it was more like 500 watts on these cobbles to keep a wheel, or to keep your momentum, or to keep your speed. So that was really tough. I was trying to find another way, either more left or more right, but there was no spot on these cobbles that was actually better or worse. It was all terrible, and my hands were hurting more and more. Like I said, I lost freaking part of the skin on my left hand. So I was trying to hold my handlebar in all these different positions. I was trying in the drops. I was trying on the tops. I was trying to alternate it so I could still keep on going. but it was just pretty crap. Right now, guess who is in front of me? It's Sven Kramer, the ice skater. He's got like a gazillion Olympic medals, and in the summer, he races on a road bike. So that's pretty cool. He rides for NWVG Groningen, which is the team in Groningen. And he rides the club competition. And now he's racing the national championship. So that's pretty dope. He's super strong in a steady pace. He can push out big power numbers for a long time. And he was still there in this group. But the group wasn't really working together, unfortunately. I was pretty sure that by now we were not gonna, close this gap. So it was better to try to conserve some energy because we had to go sprint in the end. That's what it was gonna end up, and it probably was gonna be a sprint with these guys for position, I think for position 12 and further. So that's it. But in a race like this, as I've said so many times, it's not easy peloton to the finish. Now, there's going to be more attacks, even in the last half an hour, or especially in the last half an hour when people get tired, people would start to jump from this group with 1 lap to go, half a lap to go. Right here, the guy in orange, he just keeps on going, and when nobody follows, he would take off. Like right now, he's going to push harder, and we don't really react. I'm soft pedaling right now. I didn't want to close the gap straight away, but there's no one else who is reacting. So, yeah, a moment like that when the group dies down, if you attack and you have a little gap and you can keep it up for another lap or two to the finish, you can take off. And then you don't have to worry about a field sprint because you're going to be finishing solo. So that's actually a really good way to do it. But since I was having cramps, I did not want to try this. Usually I have a pretty good sprint. In this race, I wasn't sure what I had left. It was a tough race. For everybody, of course. But I could feel it throughout this last hour, the cramps got better. So I was having a little bit of faith, like, okay, maybe I still have some power left at the end, but you don't know until you go full gas, and then you'll see what's left in the tank. But what's the best way to deal with this? If you have a lot of race experience, leave a comment and let me know. Give a tip for the rest of the viewers, for the rest of the cycling fanatics. If you have a very good tip, drop it in the comments. Let me know what you think. Like the last hour or the last half an hour in this race when it's very tough and when there's attacks, what should you do? When you are a sprinter, do you stay in the last wheel and just sort of risk the fact that you get dropped out in a group? Or do you go with every little attack and make sure that you let no one else go? I don't have any teammates right now that can do that for me. There's a couple teams who have like 2 or 3 riders in this group, but Matthew behind me, I know he's a sprinter. He was racing with me 2 years ago. Last year he was racing in a continental team. This year he's back with the club team. He has a really strong sprint. I know he's more experienced than me, so I was also having an eye on him for this last half an hour. But yeah, what's the best way to deal with this? Okay, getting in position for the cobble section again. We've got 2 rides over the cobbles left because it's 1.5 lap to go. It's roughly 10 kilometers to go to the finish. Right there after the cobbles, again, big attack. We get them back and straight away another attack. So we're still in attack mode, and pretty much every time there's an attack, full gas, chase it. And here, another surge, another big attack. So these guys get up the road together. The bell rings for the last lap. We cross the finish. We've got 1 lap to go, 10 kilometers to go. So from now on, it was more like a waiting game, focus. It's going to be a sprint between these 15 riders, but there's also going to be attacks. Again, there's a couple guys up the road, and somehow they have a gap. So there's still those two guys that went after the cobbles. They're still up the road. So Matthew is taking a nice pull. I'm overtaking and I'm continuing. There's no one on my wheel. So we get together and we rotate a little bit with the two of us. You never know, because you can see behind us, there's already a big gap. So if the guys behind us are hesitating a little bit, or they just don't have the legs anymore to close it, then, you know, if you stay with them, that's it. There's another 5-6 riders that finish in front of you. So we just did not want to let anyone go, but it's also gonna be a sprint at the end. So it's very hard to go between chasing other riders, work enough so you can stay on their wheel or catch him back, and also conserve energy for the last little sprint, because the last couple minutes before a sprint like that make a big difference. If you get to to draft a little bit in those last couple minutes, you'll be able to still push out some high numbers. If you need to close 10 gaps and burn your last 10 matches, then the last sprint is going to be useless, worthless. So it's difficult. As we were chasing that two guys in the front together, Sven Kramer put down his ice skating legs and he just zooms past us with 10 riders in his draft and overtakes us. So we just, get in their wheel again, and then the gap was closed. The two riders that went away after the cobbles, we caught them back, but then straight away there's another attack. So it was attacks, surges, and chasing just until right up to the finish. Half a lap to go. Everybody starts looking at each other. Nobody wants to pull anymore. Nobody wants to be in front. Everybody wants to be in a good position, and nobody wants to work. That's a hard situation. Last minute, there's still team cars overtaking us. I'm not sure why, because we've been riding in the same group with a breakaway for a little while now. But again, a couple riders take off. They're up the road. I don't want to close this gap, but I don't want to leave the gap either. So other riders take initiative, and I follow them. Here's one guy. He has the red, white, and blue stripes on his sleeves. So that's a national champion. That's a national champion of last year. There were actually more guys with the stripes on their sleeves in this race. So we've got the under 23s. We've got, I think, the masters, and then elite. There's a couple guys who have the stripes on their sleeves, and they're all in this race. So as you take a pull, then other guys will react and they will do something. It's weird how that sometimes works and sometimes it doesn't. I'm not sure why. But the two guys that just attacked, I think they stayed away until after the finish. So they did a good job. We were hesitating too long to chase them down. They had a gap, and like now I'm overtaking. I'm trying to take a pull, but I look back and there's no one on my wheel. If it stays like that, you won't chase it back. The rest is just probably just tired, as I was. I was really tired, but also trying to wait for the sprint, which is, it's a decision. Like I said, if you're in the back and you're gonna just draft in the back because you want to throw everything on the sprint, in a race like this, there will be guys jumping away from this group, as we just saw. So what the best course of action is, I'm not sure. I think I should have jumped with those two riders because they stayed away. I still had the legs to push hard enough at the end. I didn't jump with them, so now I'm really focusing on the sprint and trying to get a good position for those last couple 100 meters. We still have the cobbles one more time. After the cobbles, it's either gonna die down and everybody, clumps up, or it's just gonna go full gas and there's one guy going for an early attack and the speed will be very high. We'll see that in a few seconds. I was gonna tell you something about the power numbers. My average power over 4 hours in this race was 270 watts, 270. and normalized power is 300. So I did 4 hours at 300 watts. And the difference in power is 30 watts. It's quite big, and that's because of all those attacks. So the more attacks, for example, in a criterium, there would be a bigger difference between average and normalized power. But yeah, those 300 watts say how hard this race was over 4 hours long. Turning onto the cobbles for the last time. I'm second wheel, which is ideally in a big sprint finish. It would be not a very good position. I have no teammates, so you don't want to be in the front. In this case, because we're turning onto these cobbles and every time it would break into pieces on the cobbles, I wanted to stay within the first couple wheels because then I would be able to respond and to go with an early attack, or I would not be behind a split. If there's one guy in these 15 who would not be able to keep the wheel, then there would be a gap and that might not be closable. So right now I'm in Sven Kramer's wheel again. I think he was taking the left side of this cobble section every time. It was the outside turn, so it was a little bit longer, but there was a few sections that were a little smoother, and he was doing it every time. He's a big guy, so I'm just in his draft. I was not gonna overtake him. I was like, okay, I need a few other riders to get in front of me, and then have some draft and get ready for that sprint. And here we go, 1 kilometer left, attacks on the left, everybody follows, the speed is going up, we're doing almost 50k an hour, and this is actually better for a sprint finish because it doesn't clump up as much, but you know, it dies back down there straight away. So there's a lot of guys all next to each other. They're all different teams, so there's no lead out. There's no sprint lead out for anyone. Everybody's on its own right now, and it's a matter of position. I don't want to be too far in the back because the last strategy was quite narrow, and I knew that if people would start sprinting next to each other, there was no way I could get around it. So third, fourth, fifth wheel would be pretty good coming up to that last straightaway. So I'm trying to stay in position right now. I'm still okay, and right here going to the outside because then I have more options. There was a slight turn to the left, and I'm just keeping up with the speed. There's a guy coming around me, so I'm following. I'm expecting him to go full gas on the sprint, but he doesn't. I hesitate a little bit, and that's what really cost me some momentum. Right now I start sprinting, and my rear derailleur hicks up. It's jumping between different sprockets, so I couldn't really push down power. I had to sit down, shift gears, and then sprint again. Yeah, I got overtaken by a few riders there, unfortunately. So I ended up at the 24th place, which is not bad, but, you know, 2 occasions I had a little bit of bad luck or a slight misjudgment where I missed the breakaway in the first occasion, and then at the end my bike was not cooperating completely. Too bad, but 24th. Guys, thanks a lot for watching this video. Consider subscribing to the channel to not miss any more race breakdowns. Drop me a like and leave me a comment about tactics and any questions down below. Gonna see you next time. See ya!